Hi everybody, Mr. R here, and today we're going to be working on Chapter 16. This is going to be talking about radar and something called ADS-B, Alpha, Delta, Sierra, Dash, Bravo. This is relatively new. It's been coming for a long time, and I'll tell you at least what I think I know about it at this point, but we'll get there in a minute. So we're going to be going over this. This will be the last chapter before the quiz on Friday. So the quiz on Friday is going to have everything from charts all the way through chapter 16. Okay, so I think that's 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, I think. Whatever one goes with charts. Let's take a look at that just real quick, just to verify. I believe this is correct. That is correct. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. That is what your quiz is going to be. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you this right now to buckle up for Chapter 17, having to do with the VOR. Once you figure it out, once you kind of understand what VORs are, what they are, and more importantly, what they're not, it makes it a lot easier. But conceptually, from the beginning, it can be a bit confusing. So I'm giving you that warning right now. But the quiz on Friday is going to be 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. That is what your quiz is going to be. It will be on Prepware. You know Prepware well enough to know it by now, to know what stuff you need to study with regard to navigation through radar and ADS-B. So that's going to be it. You'll take a look at Big Blue. You'll take a look at your study guides in Prepware. Okay, so that's what's going to happen there. On with the show. I think you guys have a pretty, a pedestrian view of what radar is, but we're going to talk more about that. Excuse me. First of all, we'll talk about. Guys, I apologize. God dang it, I am still struggling with this junk in my chest, and I'm just so sick of it. Anyway, back to radar. Radar is that thing that sends out this radio wave on a UHF band normally, and what it does is that it sends out a signal, and it finds something called a return. A return is something when it hits something hard or something dense, and then that signal that it sends out bounces back. And so this is what radar uses to identify location, distance, in some cases size, and that's kind of the cursory elements about what radar kind of does. We use radar a lot with ATC. When I say we, ATC uses radar. We participate because also we use our transponders as well. But radar is pretty prevalent in air traffic control, and it's vital in instrument world. So that's pretty huge. Radar vectoring, separation, sequencing, all of that stuff comes into play by them being able to actually quote unquote see you. And that's where they paint you, is on their screens with their radar, and in combination with the radar and your transponders. So you can see the bullet points here of all the benefits of radar. I think the benefits of radar are pretty self-explanatory here because it allows safer operations here for aircraft. One thing, and we've talked about this before, is that when they give you information and they'll say, November 141 Hotel Lima, traffic 2 o'clock 1 mile westbound, if they say that, you have to kind of understand where 2 o'clock actually is, because we've talked about this before, and guys, it is the day of the dog. I don't know what the heck is going on with these pooches today. There's got to be a change in the weather, there's got to be something going on, because all three of these golden retrievers today have been unhinged. So, just saying. So you got to know which way that your ground track is pointing, not the nose of your airplane, but those little dots you're making across the maps, that is your ground track. That's all ATC can see. All they can see is your ground track. So they give you traffic information relative to that ground track that they see. You could be flying backwards for all they know, and it doesn't matter because they're giving you the information relative to the track that you're making across the ground and on their radar screens. So when they tell you 2 o'clock, it may not actually be at your 2 o'clock, especially if you're 15 degrees to the left of your course for your wind correction angle. So you've got to know which way that 2 o'clock is relative to your ground track. Well, that we've talked about before. You can look at all of these things. Secondary surveillance radar, SSR, that's something that we're going to be talking about here in a little bit more when it comes to transponders. It's an integral component to the use of transponders, and that transponder is that little squawk box in your airplane. And that also helps not just identify you, but kind of show ATC where you are on their radar. A couple of other things here with regard to precision approach radar, PAR, that's going to be something that we're going to be talking about there also. There aren't very many PAR locations out there. There are more and more of them that are popping up, but the PAR, the precision approach radar, is not as common. But what it does, it's hyper accurate, which is great. So PARs, those are something that you can practice where you can. Not all airports offer that service, but a lot of military pilots will use that precision approach. It's pretty cool when you get to actually do one. This is it shows you a kind of a transponder, and again, that transponder is that thing. It's a piece of equipment in your airplane that allows you to basically put a code in this box that helps identify you to ATC and allows that separation there by them being able to look at you and see kind of where you are on their scope based on the type of transponder that you had. There are several different types of transponders. We'll talk more about that here in a bit. This is one of the newer ones here by Garmin. It's a standalone box that they have. The transponder that we have in our airplanes, it looks kind of like this. You can see the soft key there where it says XPNDR. I'll go back here and you guys can see this. Let me go back one more time. So the XPDR here, that tells you this is a transponder. You press that soft key and you have a lot of different things here. You have standby, on, alt, ground, VFR, code, and ident. Now the cool part is that all of these functions are automatic now. Now you can manually switch over to ground or altitude here if you want, but all of these are automatic on the G1000. To enter a code, you hit the code button and you can hit one of 8 different numerals, 0 through 7, and the cool part about this is that you can do it in sequence versus the old style with the round knobs that you had to kind of dial it in. This you can kind of punch it in there. So for instance, if you're wanting flight following as a VFR pilot, or you're certainly on an instrument flight plan with your instrument flight plan, you will have a discrete squawk code. That means that code is going to be it. So let's say that you're requesting flight following, which is ATC VFR separation as their schedule allows, and they come back to you and they say November 141 Hotel Lima, squawk 4135 and ident. So what you would do is that you would hit the transponder button here, hit the code 4135 and ident. Now what ident does, ident sends a pulse to ATC And what it does is there's a special character that'll kind of pop up next to the aircraft that they kind of think is you. And that will help identify them quickly with that little flashing character there, so they don't have to hunt all over the screen and try to find the 4135 that you have entered. I'm going to turn that off there so that quits beeping. So that puts your squawk code right here. Now, let's say that you've got your airport in sight, you're ready to land, and they tell you 141 Hotel Lima, radar service is terminated, squawk VFR, have a great day. So you'd come back to your transponder like this, hit transponder, and in this case, squawk VFR, and you'd hit this. VFR squawk code is 1200. And that puts you back over here so that it gives you a VFR code so that you're not mixed in with other IFR traffic or other traffic that has another discrete squawk code. So that's kind of how the transponder thing works, and we'll look at that more in a little bit. Pressing down here, radar vectoring. You guys know what a vector is. A vector is basically, it's kind of a heading and a speed. It's just basically turn to this direction. So in this case, you might get an instruction like they talk about this here in the book. 7074 Delta, turn left heading 250. What general direction are you flying on a heading of 250? If you said west-southwest, give yourself a pat on the back there, okay? So, turn left heading 250. November 141 Hotel Lima, turn right heading 045. So now you know that you're going northeast. This is why that compass thing is so important for you guys to get in your head. November 890 Uniform Sierra, turn left heading 135. If they ask you to turn to a heading of 135, what direction are you flying? That is correct. Southeast. Okay. Here again, departures. You may get radar vectors as they kind of vector you around, and they kind of turn you around busy airspaces and get you pointed in the right direction to get you into the en route phase of your flight. It really depends on the airspace. It depends on the city. There are some cities through here, it's just when we start talking about instrument flight plans, we'll start talking about just things that you have to consider. Because with an instrument flight plan, it makes things easier in some regard. However, on an instrument flight plan, one of the things that they can do is that they can give you a standard instrument departure, or a SID. And what that may do, that may actually send you 40 miles in the opposite direction before they turn you back and head you out on course. So in some cases, you might want to file what we call a composite flight plan, which is where you launch VFR and then you get to a certain point where you want to be, and then you activate your IFR flight plan from that particular waypoint, and that's called a composite flight plan. That's Las Vegas, when you're heading out of Las Vegas, and it kind of depends on the time of day and the time of year, but they're notorious for sending you way the heck out west before you're actually able to fly back to the east. And it's not that big a deal in like the real fast movers and the big heavy airplanes. But when you're in a little bug smasher, it's like, holy cow, I'm flying 30 minutes this way before I have to come back, fly this exact same 30 minutes to reach my start point before I can go wherever in the heck I want to go. So these are considerations that you have to have. My point is that radar vectoring is kind of how ATC or departure gets you out of those airspaces and on your way, hopefully without being bruised too much. So they'll help you there at some point whenever they don't have time for you. If you're on a VFR flight plan, they may say something about, resume on navigation. That means you're kind of on your own. And you can do that. VFR, that's fine, see and avoid. But IFR, you're in the rocking chair the entire time. The en route side, this is one of the things here is that in an instrument flight plan, they've got to be able to see you. If they can't, we have certain procedures that we can use in those interim times in the en route phase where you make certain self-reporting requirements that you have during the en route phase, but most of the time, unless you are way out in the boonies, they'll be able to see you, especially if you're above a certain altitude. The approach, this is the part here now from the en route phase. As you start approaching the landing area here, you will have kind of a standard terminal arrival procedure that precedes the approach. But this again is where they get you lined up to intercept the kind of the course that you need to begin an instrument approach. Again, the en route phase goes to the arrival phase goes to the approach phase. So as you look down here, I think they actually have a picture of this. Yes, they do. So what they'll do is that they kind of basically verbally line you up for the approach when they can. Now, in some cases, they may not be able to do this, and they expect you to fly the approach as it is from your various, initial fixes that you have to start your approach. But a lot of times what they'll do is that they can give you radar vectors, and that's really helpful whenever you're learning how to fly these approaches. So you have all, not only do you have, like we talked about before, the horizontal component of your flying, but they also have the vertical components of this as well. You have certain minimum vectoring altitudes that are going to be part of this, that you have to stay above a certain altitude. In certain airspaces, like real busy Class Bravo airspace like Los Angeles, for instance, you're going to have actual bracketed altitudes that you have to say, in a lot of cases they'll say, okay, we don't want you to go below this. Well, they'll also say, and we don't want you above this. If we tell you that you want to be at that 3,500 feet, they want you on 3,500 feet. So you have the vertical component that you're responsible for to fly precisely, and you also have that left-right thing, that horizontal component of navigation. Whew. So with this gives you it's really a pretty cool example. So they'll tell you this. So in other words, they're basically the pilot is requesting. They are requesting here, and they're saying here, Bravo Charlie, like whatever this person's tail number happens to be. We're going to give you radar vectors here to line you up for the ILS 27. Well, thank you very much. Okay, here we go. You're flying over here, and you'll notice you're flying, they're kind of putting you in here in kind of a downwind thing, kind of you're flying parallel to the runway, and then they turn you back in. And so what they'll do is they'll say, turn left heading 090, descend 3,000. Normally what they'll do is they'll say, descend, maintain 3,000. And you need to repeat this back to them. So then you'll say, turning left heading 090, leaving 4,500 for 3,000, and 333 Bravo Charlie. You kind of end with your tail number is sort of how you do it. Then they come back to you and they say, Bravo Charlie, turn further left heading 085. Turning left heading 085, 323 Bravo Charlie. Then they come to you and they say, Bravo Charlie, turn right heading 200. Turning right heading 200, 333 Bravo Charlie. Or they'll say 3 Bravo Charlie or whatever. So you're turning here to 200, so you're turning here past south and you're coming in this direction. You can see that your ILS here is for runway 27, so you can kind of assume that without wind you have a heading here, a magnetic heading of 270 roughly. So what they're doing here is they're turning you here to give you an intercept inside of like about 40 degrees. They try to give it to you somewhere in that 30-degree range, where they bring you around. And in fact, a lot of times what that pattern looks like, if you really wanted to look at this, what they would do is they would bring you around like this, turn you in here to kind of a base leg, and then they would give you an intermediate 45 before they turned you over here on this. So this would be kind of a 45-degree turn. And the reason that they do this and they give you that 45-degree turn or a 30-degree turn is because most autopilots can't make a turn greater than 90 degrees. So if you're using a coupled approach here with your autopilot, it's a lot easier on your equipment if you can kind of cut those turns, in halves. In other words, instead of making a 90-degree turn, we give you a 45 coming in here off this to make this easier for you to intercept your inbound course without blowing through it like some cases your autopilot would do. So what they would do is they'd give you this one, and then they're going to give you something else like this. And they'll say, November, tree, Bravo, Charlie, turn further right, heading 240 for a pilot intercept of the 27 localizer report established. And then you repeat that back. Turning right, heading 240, looking for the 27 localizer will report when established. And that's what they do, and they'll call you in, and they expect you to repeat all of this. And I'll show you something else here. I don't know why that's not, there we go, okay. So that's kind of what they want you to do. Now what they'll do is they'll say, Bravo Charlie, cleared for the final approach, runway 27 ILS, contact tower at 125.15 at the outer marker. Cleared for the final approach on 27 ILS, we'll call contact tower at 25.15 and we'll contact at the outer marker, tree, Bravo Charlie. And that's kind of how you do it. There's a couple of other things that we'll bring up here to you. The reason I'm saying this is because the communication part of this can happen pretty quick. The more you can practice the communication stuff on the ground, the better off you're going to be in the airplane, because you got a lot of stuff going on up there, especially if you're in instrument conditions and you're shooting one of these approaches. This communication stuff, there's a little bit of an art to it. It's why we use those headsets with the simulators that we have in the classroom. The using the transponder here, and they call this the XPDR here for your transponder. We talk about the transponder. This is a little bit older. This is a Bendix King transponder. This is a lot like what you'd find in some of the older 172s. We have not the real old ones, because the real old ones would have a lot of these dials there as well. So those are kind of funky. But you can see here that you can dial in what you want. You've got standby, test, on, altitude. You can squawk VFR here by just hitting the VFR button to reset this to 1200, or you can go ahead and when you're in the on mode here, you can tap in whatever your 4-digit squawk code happens to be. If they want you to hit ident, you'd hit ident. Remember that when you hit the ident button, it sends this little pulsing flash thing to their screen to help them identify you. So you can look at some of these things here. You've got like the Mode C transponders, which gives you not just kind of location, but it also gives you altitude. So you have the altitude encoding component there with that, with the Mode Cs. You guys can look at all of this stuff here. You've read this, hopefully, that you can see here. We also have Mode S transponders now. I'll talk to you about that in a little bit. Code selection, we've talked about this before. You are going to be responsible for knowing the following codes. 7700 is the emergency code. 7600 is a radio out. 7500 is for hijacking. 1200 is going to be for VFR. And also remember, 7777 is not a code you want to enter, at least if self-preservation is an instinct that you possess. So there's that. Radio terminology for the transponder operation. You can talk about, you look at this here, squawking code 4000, hit ident, standby, normal. All of these, you can look at that here as well. Mode C transponders are probably the most prevalent transponders, and the reason being is because you have airspace considerations that you have to have where you must have a Mode C transponder to operate within those airspaces. So with this, that's why most people have a Mode C. The newer ones now with the Mode S are even better, because they have other reporting capabilities in those as well. The codes here that we have, you guys can look at this. We talked about that. Mandatory requirements for the transponder. Again, this is where you've got to have that Mode C transponder operating in these aircraft. If you're in, like for instance, if you ever plan on flying an instrument aircraft, it's got to have a Mode C transponder, because if you're going to get up there above 18,000 feet in Class Alpha airspace, you've got to have that Mode C transponder. Class Bravo airspace in Denver, in Dallas, in LA. Class Charlie airspace, Colorado Springs, Albuquerque. You've got to have that Mode C transponder. These are things that you guys are going to need to know, so I'd pay special attention to these 4 bullet points right here. Those are all test questions. Mode S. This is what most all of us have now, the new types of transponders. And again, it's pretty much automatic here now with a lot of the reporting stuff that they have in there. You still enter a squawk code, but it gives ATC more information about you and your airplane and about the navigational and performance capabilities that you have for your airplane. So that's kind of what that is. Radar, kind of how radar works. I don't know if you guys, how many of you are World War II buffs, but I kind of am. And a guy named Heinrich Hertz is the one who is credited for really developing modern radar, German fella, which is ironic since the fact that the English were the ones that took that that discovery, and they tweaked it to the point that it actually saved England during the Battle of Britain. Were it not for the radar, the Germans surely would have bombed England into oblivion. And so by them knowing where the inbound German aircraft were, smaller numbers of fighters were able then to intercept these inbound bombers, and it saved England. So, there you go, just a little something here for history. It's kind of line of sight stuff that you see there, and it doesn't really like to have a lot of stuff in the way. And when I say a lot of stuff, I'm talking about even weather, and you can talk about that here in just a little bit. But so that's kind of how that works. Line of sight, reflection of radio waves. You can look here at this stuff here that you've read. Reflecting radar waves, you want to have a signal that comes back in order to really kind of be anything that is useful to someone on the ground looking for traffic. Some of the radar evading aircraft that our military has developed, they have ways that they can kind of bend the shape of the aircraft so they can send the signals elsewhere so they don't get a return, or they also have radar absorbent materials that they have on the outside of the aircraft to minimize the return or the size of the echo that they get on that radar screen. So this is going to be the primary antenna. Remember that thing that I talked to you about the Mode C transponder here using the SSR stuff here? This is that little rectangular piece that has been added to this dish that helps with that portion with those transponders. So this is kind of a way that you can see what's going on here, kind of a radar antenna. One thing I want to kind of share with you here is that on these radars is that when you look here, you're showing an antenna that is showing a beam kind of like that. Well, this arc right here, that's a pretty wide arc for this at this distance. So I don't want you to think it kind of looks like that. It's a little bit wider, but then the objects that are closer to this are going to be identified much more predictably, and there is a limit to how far out here that radar will be effective. So that's one of the things that you also kind of need to understand, is because that signal then becomes kind of watered down the further out it gets. So I just wanted to kind of show you that, because like with most things with these illustrations having to do with angles of aircraft when they take off or land or whatever, it's the same kind of a thing here. But you can see this is picking up airplanes, it's picking up clouds, so it can pick up a lot of different things, and it is it would be hard for us to do what we do without them. When you look here, time, speed, and distance, these are calculations that we have been making using your E6Bs here as well. You can look at this and you kind of figure, you know, the speed of light and how quickly these things return. If you look here at this, 250 millionth of a second, that's pretty quick. So if you look at how far that goes, so in this case, 60 nautical miles, that's going to be about 3/4 of a second here, something like that. I think, if I'm not mistaken, 100 millionth, something like that. I don't know. But again, it just takes a while for that thing to get back. At what range can the radar detect the targets? You can look at this. There's a formula here. We don't use this here in our, testing stuff that we do. Sorry guys, I was listening because I'm hearing a disturbance downstairs again. So here you go, 5,000 feet AGL, flat terrain, no obstruction, aircraft to be detected at approximately 87 nautical miles. So that's, that's pretty good. You've got the curvature of the Earth that you have to factor in here, because remember, over a certain amount of distance, this is not going to be kind of a straight line, because we're flying around a big ball here. Again, the curvature of the Earth doesn't look quite like this at 122 miles, but that's just kind of the way they've done the example there. So here we go, looking at different types of radars and the pulses that they use. Short-range radars, the pulses here are going to be closer together than the long-range radars. One thing also that you kind of have to think about is that that's quite an electrical signal being sent out there by radar. There are some places that they don't want humans to be within a certain distance of the actual transmission portion of that, because it can kind of mess with you physiologically. So you kind of want to be careful about that. Primary surveillance radar. This is one of those things that you find around airports, certainly, is the primary surveillance radar. And you'll see these are everywhere. Your primary surveillance radars, almost everybody uses something like this. This one, the precision approach radar, is the one that, again, it's very, very accurate, but it's also kind of rare. You can look there. This is kind of shows you here on figure 16-11, shows you what I was talking about here with sort of this beam of the radar, and kind of see how they have that. And you can also see that it's showing a little different kind of a beam here down below. So again, a broader beam is just not going to be as precise. When you look here at 16-13, you'll see here, you can see an advancing target here that's not really going very fast, because this, depending upon the radar, this may circle like once a second. It may circle once every 2 seconds, and every time it'll paint this target as it's either coming in or going away. In this case, a fast-moving target, it's going to be spaced out a little bit further because it's moving quite a bit, quite fast away. And then as this one's coming inbound, it's going quite a bit slower, you can see, because of the fact that the little dots are closer together. In the screens that you'll see at a TRACON somewhere, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do that at some point. Those of you that are going to be on our XED course coming up here this next year in the fall, I think actually before school starts. Wow. You'll actually be able to see this because we have some pretty cool things planned for that course. And this is going to be one of the things that we're going to get to see. So on the screens that you see here on 16-14, this is something that an air traffic controller would look at. So you can see that around here what you have is that you have a lot of the airspace boundaries that they have around here. You can see this is one of the aircraft that they have, and this is kind of a sort of an ID about what that airplane is based on their transponder. It'll give you altitude, it'll give you kind of your tell you, are you climbing, are you descending? It'll give you a vector. So this is what they use when they look at these. Disadvantages of primary radar. Well, one of the things here, as I mentioned before, things that have certain amounts of density, it'll paint the actual cloud here, so it can be kind of useful when it comes to weather. However, if you're actually looking for airplanes, if you're shooting through precipitation, you may not be able to see that airplane through this kind of precipitation. So you wind up with these blind spots in there sometimes that actually move, which are going to be clouds, of course. Terrain is also another thing. It's just you can't shoot through a mountain. So that's one of the other things that you'll see with a certain amount of things they call clutter on the screen. This kind of talks about this as well. It can also move not just the angle of the beam, but it can, you know, wherever it's going, but it circles also so they can see in a certain sector around the aircraft, around the airport there. SSR, we talked about that before. This is that little thing that's on the top of the dish. And you can read about that. This one, it's hard to see, but this is an old transponder. You can see below this, if you look really, really hard, is that you can see that you have the numbers in the box, and below each number you have a dial. And that's the way the old ones used to be. You'd have to kind of spin those up with the numbers, and you had to be really, really careful that whenever you were spinning things around, not to spin them in a combination that put 4 7s up there on your transponder. Radar screens, SSR, yeah, you can look at that. You can see kind of how ATC uses that information. So that's kind of the radar stuff that we use. Another thing has to do with traffic. We have, on our aircraft, we have traffic detection systems that we have. They're all a little bit different, but what they're designed to do is that they're designed to find other aircraft. Now, we don't have radar in our airplanes, but what we do have is we do have an ability to interrogate other transponders that are out there, so aircraft that have transponders on. Remember, based on your regulations, is that you don't have to have a transponder on in a lot of situations. In fact, you don't even have to have a radio if you're flying, in certain parts of the country in areas that don't require a radio. I can't imagine why someone would not have a radio in an airplane, but they do. So we also have these traffic detection systems that we have. The thing here is they talk about this under the active systems is that they'll say that the airlines have these traffic and collision avoidance systems called TCAS. Well, actually we have TCAS in our small little airplanes, and TCAS is it's pretty slick. And then you also have something that's like TAS. You also have something called TIS, T-I-S, and the difference there is that you have an interrogator on board your airplane that will help you identify other traffic around you. Then you have others that are kind of systems that are not as complex as like a TCAS type of a system. And what it will do is that it may only offer traffic in a certain radar environment. We had 2 airplanes that we had in New Mexico that had a TIS system, which is traffic information system, but it only worked in a radar environment. So while we were there in Albuquerque, it would paint the other aircraft that were participating there in that radar, you know, the area with the Albuquerque approach and departure radar. But what was really bad is the fact that that coverage, it stopped right at the edge of our practice area, northwest of Albuquerque. And it was like, God dang it, if we just had this for another 12 miles, we would also have the ability to see the traffic that was out there in our practice area, but we didn't have that. But the planes that we fly in the Diamonds, we have more traffic, and I'll tell you more about that here a little bit to kind of help you. Now, that said, one thing I do want to caution you is that you can't always just trust the screen. You can't just look at your fish finder over here and think, okay, here's all my traffic that I have to worry about. Au contraire, it is your responsibility to see and avoid. And when ATC says traffic 2 o'clock, 1 mile westbound, do you have the traffic? No joy. I can't see the traffic. I don't see the traffic. Tally ho, 141 Hotel Lima. I see the traffic. There you go. This kind of goes through the different types of TCAS systems that they have. One of the things that happens here on these TCAS displays, and again, this is what we have on our airplanes here as well, is that it will actually paint the aircraft here. So for instance here, -11 with an arrow going this direction. What it's telling you is that this airplane is 1,100 feet below you and it's going the same direction you are, if this is your airplane. Here you have an airplane that's 500 feet above you going the opposite direction. No threat. This one, I've got to keep my eye on. Ding, 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 ding. Here's one coming at me just off here to, at this point, the way my airplane is pointed at my 2 o'clock, but this aircraft is only 200 feet above me. So this is going to be one that I definitely want to watch out for. Now the other thing is that we have with our synthetic vision is that from the center line, so if you look here on our primary flight display, and if you're to split this screen right down the middle here from this airplane straight ahead, we have about 30 degrees to the left and about 30 degrees to the right where we will actually look for traffic. That traffic could be up here above us, it could be at our level, the traffic could be below us, and it'll be painted here on your primary flight display. And this is really handy if you've got something with either some head-on kind of traffic that may be out there. Now the part that's tough is when you have crossing traffic, because remember, you're only looking at a sector of about a 60-degree angle here in front, that it'll paint this information here in front of you. So in some cases what we will do is that here on our inset we will also have traffic turned on that will show us a plan view of the traffic, as opposed to this, which is giving us a profile view of the traffic. The other thing that we will do as well is that we will have traffic that will show up here on our multifunction display. In some cases, you'll have systems that will give you an audible alert that will tell you traffic, 1 o'clock, 1 mile, traffic, 1 o'clock. You know, and it'll tell you that if it gets within the little hockey puck zone here. By the way, that was a nod to our girls hockey team, state champions. Well done. So that's kind of how the traffic works there. ADS-B. We haven't quite got there yet, but we're going to talk about this here in a second. And I'll kind of hold off on ADS-B here until we get to that point. You've got a couple of other different types of TCAS systems that you have there. You can look at that. There are, as far as I know, there are no questions on the FAA exam about the differentiation between the types of those. The Mode S transponder, again, this is something here that, as they say, is becoming increasingly common. Well, it's almost all of us have them here now. But again, it gives additional information when it's painted, and some of that information can actually show up on the display. So for instance, if you have an aircraft that may have that Mode S transponder, you may see actual aircraft identification information here on your screen if you have a system in your aircraft that is designed to give you that information. So it's pretty high tech. There are some of the passive systems that are out there as well, and you can look at that. There's just some of them that will give you, like digital readout if they detect traffic out there, if they detect another transponder. You'll also see some of the other passive systems that they have. You might get a voice that'll say traffic, you know, whatever. This is the thing here that I want to bring you to, and this is this conclusion. And this is the thing that you have to kind of keep in mind. This is why traffic is so important. It's not just being able to see the traffic on your fish finder over here, but it's being able to hear people communicating, hear their position reports, and being able to learn how to paint an image in your head, this three-dimensional image of where people are. And it's not just where they are, it's where they're going. This is that thing that we call three-dimensional chess. And that's what you do in the airplanes when you are near a busy airport, certainly. Where do most accidents happen? Where are most of the near misses that happen? Well, they happen where there's a lot of airplanes, and it seems like there's an awful lot of airplanes that are taking off from airports these days. So that's kind of where you will expect to see traffic. Understanding the flow, understanding where you need to be, you know, as coming in or out of these airports is very, very important for your safety and well-being. But being able to hear these other traffic, being able to understand, okay, I've got one that's heading away from me here, it's 5,000 feet above me, no factor. I've got another one though that's below me coming up that's heading my direction. I need to pay attention to that. Where is he, where is he, where is he? So those are the things that you have to really pay attention to. So I'm just saying. Automatic dependent surveillance broadcast. Guys, this is something that we have been working, when I say we, we're talking about the aviation community, the FAA, the people that handle airport traffic and aircraft traffic around the nation. We've been talking about this, talking about it for decades, actually implementing it now, and it will be mandatory. I believe it's January 1, 2020. It was going to be January 1, 2018, but they moved that back because people are still getting a little slow on the uptick about getting ADS-B equipped aircraft out there. I can talk with a little experience about this because when I bought the Stationair, the November 504 Hotel Lima, when I bought that, one of the things that I wanted to have happen is I wanted them to unlock the synthetic vision on the primary flight display, and I wanted to add the Garmin GTX 345R ADS-B module to this system to make that aircraft ADS-B compliant. The thing that you get with ADS-B is that you get weather. Weather comes to you on this system, which is great to show that on your multifunction display. So for instance here, I would have a display that I can get weather from ADS-B, which is XM weather. The other thing that it does is that it gives me additional traffic information. I have the Avidyne 600 active traffic in that airplane as well. And now I have the ADS-B traffic on. So what they did is that they merged the software to give me, quote unquote, the best of both worlds with regards to threat identification. And that's what I've got on this airplane. The way that that works is kind of cool. Remember me saying that it's a big sky. Well, it's a big sky unless you get closer and closer and closer to an airport. Now all of a sudden that sky gets quite a bit smaller. So to be able to identify other aircraft and not hit anybody is kind of a big thing. So with this system, what it allows me to do is it allows me to a little higher degree of assurance, I guess, of being able to have traffic that's going to pop up not just here on my multifunction display, but also to have that traffic that's going to pop up for me here on my synthetic vision, as well as my inset over here. So not only do I have terrain awareness, but I also have traffic awareness. ADS-B is that big promise to help us with that. That was the big promise of ADS-B. It puts ground-based transmitters, receivers and transmitters all over the country. It is an entire complex all over the lower 48, and I want to say now Alaska, because if memory serves, they were actually testing all of these systems in Alaska before we got them here in the lower 48. I may have that wrong, I can't remember, but I think that's what I remember reading, God, all those years ago, about being able to help us with the see and avoid here. But the other thing, and the reason that the government has been so keen on spending the money to make this happen, here's what else it will do. It begins to shift the responsibility from ATC with regard to aircraft separation to put that on the pilot now. Now, with these tools in the cockpit of being able to actually see more aircraft, now the onus will be more on us to not hit anybody. That's really kind of where this is going. By having ADS-B, the other thing that it will do is that it will open up different routes for us to fly. If you kind of look, and you know, in your careers, as you start using ForeFlight and you start using the ADS-B, and by the way, that's another benefit of the module that I have in my airplane. On my iPad, I don't have to have the separate ADS-B receiver that I've had with my iPad. But what it will do, it works with this remote mounted unit that I have. Yes, and there's way too much canine activity downstairs, by the way. But it works with this remote mounted unit that I have, so it gives me a higher degree of not just traffic that I have on ForeFlight here for secondary and tertiary systems that I have inside the airplane, but it also gives the weather, it also gives all of that. And then anybody else who gets into my airplane with an iPad, I can give them the code and, you know, heck, you know, ForeFlight for everybody. But that's what this does. But again, part of that is going to be, it all sounds great. Yeah, let's see, everybody get ADS-B. But that's ultimately what's happening, is it's putting more responsibility here now on the pilot versus, you know, there with ATC. But the cool part is that you may get different routing now because you may be able to open up this sky. The reason being is because if everybody can see everybody and the ground and ATC can see you here as well with ADS-B, then they don't have these dark corridors that they used to call them where the radar couldn't penetrate. Well, now you've got these ground-based stations that are picking up the information for the airplanes, and now these areas are no longer dark. We can see everybody. As long as you're at a certain altitude to be able to get picked up by those towers, you're golden. And so now, hopefully, that will minimize delays. It will open up the sky for more favorable routing as you guys move around the country. That's the promise that I hope that all of this ADS-B stuff does. But that's kind of how this thing works. It tells you here about the ground-based transceiver. That's a receiver and a transmitter in one, kind of how that works. And you can read here on the ADS-B about how these things kind of work. But here's the other element that I wanted to bring up with you here, and I wanted to get to this image. I don't know if there's anybody in this class that went with us to Embry-Riddle a year ago last August, but I took a group of, how many kids did I take? I took 4 kids from Aspen to Embry-Riddle in Prescott, Arizona. One of the things that they're doing at Embry-Riddle right now is they actually have a degree program in place for this, but it's part of that oh, I'm forgetting the term here. Doggone it. It's kind of this counterintelligence here with computers. You know, it's oh my gosh, I can't remember the name. I'll think of it here in a minute. But it's basically, it's like, how do we protect the internet? How do we protect this? Cybersecurity, my God in heaven, that's what it's called. A degree in cybersecurity. So what you can do is that with anything, you know, anybody who has this type of criminal intent, they can pick up a laptop and they can get in there and through the dark web or through whatever, they can hack into who knows what. Well, here's the thing that they showed us at Embry-Riddle during this cybersecurity thing. They used ADSB as kind of an example about how this type of a system could be threatened. If we look here at this, and you'll remember this picture up here, is that you have this little tower up here, this transceiver, okay? Because this is something that receives and transmits, right? Well, what runs it? A computer. So what is to stop somebody from picking up a laptop somewhere and hacking into this system? You could conceivably take control of that aircraft output and you could paint other aircraft away from it, or you could hide or mask another airplane that could possibly be on a collision course with that aircraft. There's a lot of mischief and a lot of harm that could happen from all of this. And it's by hacking this system that this thing can happen. Do you remember at the beginning of the year when I said to you that there was a report that came across the news that scared the ever-loving tar out of me? And that was where this airline, and I want to say it was Delta, they used one of the airlines. It could have been American, it could have been United, it could have been anybody that has these systems on here. They put a crew at the pointy end of the airplane, and they told the crew, what we're going to do is we're going to do some testing on some navigation stuff. But what they didn't tell the crew was that there was a group of people from the government and the airlines sitting at the gate right there at the tarmac looking at the airplane with a dude on a laptop that hacked into the airplane through the ADSB system and took control of the communications of the airplane and the navigation of the airplane. And the crew had no idea. Sobering? I think so. My point is this. Technology is great until it isn't. And that's the thing that we have to be aware of. This is that thing where I launched into this tirade about what exactly am I training kids to do. Used to be, it'd be flying an airplane. Now, you may have to have a different skill set. You may have to have somebody else in that airplane that is looking at not just threats in the sky with the traffic and stuff that's being painted out there for you on your screens, but also, is somebody trying to hack my airplane? I know it sounds silly, it sounds dumb, but guys, I'm telling you, that's where this is going. And it's, to an old codger like me, it's frightening. Anyway, this is kind of the benefits of ADSB. So, yeah, this is kind of how all of that's going to work there in some Orwellian kind of a universe. So read up on ADSB. Weather detection and avoidance. So I mentioned before that ADSB will offer some weather into the cockpit. The thing that you need to remember is that the weather that shows up inside the cockpit, unless your aircraft is equipped with weather radar, if you're getting XM weather that's being pumped up through ADSB or through some other type of a navigation subscription that gives you the weather, it's history. There is a big latency period that you need to be aware of. In the best of worlds, that information that you're getting is 7 minutes old. And it can be as old as 15 to 20 minutes old. So that is something that you've got to be aware of, is that this is not a picture of what's happening now. You're looking at history on this weather, if it is not active radar weather on your machines. And the reason I tell you this is this. Pilots have been tempted, and pilots they've made bad decisions with regard to weather penetration using a weather product like XM Weather in your airplane. They tell you 100 different times. They say, this type of weather will not allow you to penetrate storms or anything else, thinking that you see a break in the clouds. Oh, wait a minute, right here's a break over here. Gosh, in 4 minutes I can be through that and I can be on my way, versus doing something else and having to fly 45 minutes around something. That's what we call a sucker hole. That hole may not be there anymore because you're looking at something that is a stale weather picture. It's not accurate. Now, what it is great for are trends. You can look for trends that are happening. You can look for things that are kind of building up, especially like in the early to mid-afternoons, like you'll see in the plain states popping up here in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Those are things that you can see, and you can use that to kind of develop a sense of what you think is going to happen based on what has happened. And so that's where it can be useful, but it is not it's something that you would use to try to penetrate a line of thunderstorms, to get between storms, to get wherever it is that you're going. Do not use it like that. That's not what that is for. On the other hand, there are certain weather radars that people do have on their airplanes. I've only been in one airplane that we've had that actually had weather radar, and we didn't have it long enough to really go out there and play with it. But I did read the guides enough, and one thing I can tell you is that when you go into one of these things, and I'm trying to get over here, here as well, when you start looking at like an image like this on figure 16-26, it's almost a college course in engineering to go through the guide on how to use the radar on board the airplane, because you have not just the angle of the radar that you can angle either on the level that you're at on your airplane, you can angle it above you, you can angle it below you, you can actually spread the beam out. But when you spread the beam out, you kind of lose some of the precision of it. You can narrow the beam, it gets more precise, but then you lose the big picture. So there, you almost have to be this bit of a weather whisperer when you're up there using the actual radar on board the airplane. If you look at the image that we're looking at right now, here you have something that will show you, here's a small cloud right here, but here it shows you, wow, okay, well here's a big gap right here. I know what I'll do. I'm going to fly around this, and then I'm going to go right between these two fellas right here. Yeah? Really? Well, there he is. That's just one great big fella as opposed to two smaller fellas. And it doesn't show up on the radar. So you kind of have to know what's being masked, what are you actually looking at there. And it's not as easy or as straightforward as you might think. There's quite a bit to it. I will tell you that. Now, if somebody said, "Hey, Greg, I'm going to give you onboard weather radar," I'd take it and I'd figure it out. But yeah, that's something else. Storm scopes. We have something there, and a storm scope basically is a lightning detector. What is always present in a thunderstorm? You better know this. Lightning. Otherwise, why would they call it a thunderstorm? They would just call it a storm. So you have lightning that's present. So wouldn't it be cool if you had a way to detect lightning Well, that's pretty much what a strike finder or a storm scope does. It detects lightning. Now, one thing I wanted to do here, and I am, hang on here, I wanted to see if this has, it does. So if we look here at the multifunction display, you'll see a thing down here that will say storm scope. So with this, and I'm trying to see if that's going to work. I don't know that it's going to. Hang on. Oh, shoot. Let me see if I can do this. I'm just trying. I have no idea if I can or not. Hang on. Hang on. Here we go. Storm scope. How about that? So what this does is that this will lay out this grid around the airplane, and what it does, it's a lightning detection unit. So you can set this and you can say, what mode do I want? Do I want a cell mode? Do I want a strike mode? How do I want to set it? So I can find these little things of lightning. If I look over here at my 11 o'clock and I see this cluster of lightning over here, what do you think that is? Well, that's a thunderstorm. That's probably not something I want to fly into. So I see lightning over here, I see lightning over here, I see nothing over here. I know I'm going to go this direction and avoid that lightning. That's kind of how that works. It will show you here the type of mode that you have, so whether you're in strike mode or cell mode. It will also tell you, it'll give you the latency of how old this information is. But this is a handy little device. It's as close to onboard radar as I have on the Dixie Clipper. But that's it's a pretty useful tool, I will say that. So antennas, processors, control units. This shows you the display. And this is, where you would see the strike. So what I wanted to show you is this. If you look here and you see the storm scope over here and you see the lightning detectors showing you here these clusters as well, you use this information to then come over here. Hang on here. You use this information, and it's not going to show me this. Hang on here. I want to show you this because this is actually here, and it's not. This is just. There we go. So here, if I have this right here, and I'm looking at my XM weather, and I see that I have a line of some type of storms through here. Let's say I'm looking at this, and I couple this information that I'm seeing here with NexRad, and I couple that over here to my strike finder. Now I have quite a bit of a better weather awareness around me here because I can take information here from my XM radar and use this here with my strike finder to see, am I really seeing what I think I'm seeing? So if you kind of blend all of that information together, now you have a better situational understanding about what's going on outside the cockpit. So it's kind of cool. And again, this weather stuff, you're going to start to get a little more geeky about the weather once you start actually flying in it. So just saying. So with this, strike finders, there's your displays. There's your summary, and there's the end of chapter 16, okay? So, now, what's our quiz on Friday? Quiz on Friday is chapter 12 through chapter 16, and that's what we're gonna go with. Find the information in Big Blue, find the information on Prepware. This will be a Prepware exam, and it will take you the class period to get through this because there's quite a bit of stuff on it. So you're going to be looking for cross-country stuff that you have done here, that you have done. You've done it here for Colorado. You've done it kind of for real. Now you're going to go back through these cross-country problems that we have had here in Big Blue and also on Prepware, and you're going to start finding things like your true course, your magnetic heading, and your compass heading. you're going to start finding those things like that on those cross-country problems. So you're actually going to be doing it. You're going to be finding information on an an AFD, the chart summary guides, goodness. So you're going to be having to look stuff up here, not just on your maps, on your chart summary guides, cross-country problems, GPS problems. So there's a lot of stuff for you guys to bone up on for this quiz coming up here on Friday. Then on Monday, we're going to dive headlong into VORs. So just as soon as you're done with the quiz on Friday, you can start your reading on Chapter 17, having to do with VORs, very high frequency omnidirectional range, ground-based navigation. And buckle up. So guys, there you go. Thanks very much. Have an awesome, awesome day today, and I will see you soon. Thanks, guys.